Today we learn more about President Trump's controversial White House ballroom project. The architect revealed new details about the plan, and protesters called for the project to be stopped.
Investigative reporter Ted Oberg and the News 4i team have been following the day's developments. Ted joins us live with what we've learned. Ted?
Yeah, architect Sharon Baronis has been tapped for the job. He presented not necessarily a plan, maybe the concept for a plan of a $400 million project. You can see him here presenting it at the National Capital Planning Commission today. The entire project, and that's this portion of the White House there, will be 89,000 square feet. The ballroom itself, which is the top floor of this project, 22,000 square feet, expected to have enough space to seat 1,000 people for dinner. The architect revealed the ballroom project will be the same height as the White House. Here you see views from the Treasury Department and from the lawn of the White House. The ballroom itself will be 40 feet tall inside. The first floor, a commercial kitchen, offices for the First Lady, and a grand staircase. The ballroom above would have extensive balconies on the outside that wrap 3 sides. Now, we know the east wing of the White House has already been demolished, and today we learned the White House has already begun to construct the foundation for the new building before approvals were granted. During the meeting, there was little opposition from the Planning Commission, but there were protests outside from activists who say the project should be halted because the White House bypassed congressional approval before demolishing the East Wing this fall and is funding the ballroom through private donors, which they say could open the door to corruption.
First of all, I believe this needs to be stopped. I mean, the People's House should not be for sale, should never be for sale. There are higher standards that should operate in decisions like this. Renovations, yes. Needed renovations and improvement, yes. But this is an obscene absurdity. What they are building doesn't even represent what the people need. It doesn't represent what the people want, and it is not accordance with American values.
The project is being challenged in court by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which alleges the administration broke ground before plans were submitted to the Planning Commission and without approval from Congress. In a statement, the White House is telling us today we will, and have so far, released the names of donors and companies who want to be named publicly. Donors have also the option to remain anonymous, and we will honor that, the White House says, if that's what they choose. A spokesperson for the Planning Commission tells us they anticipate this project will now follow their typical review cycle, which means the White House should submit documents 5 weeks ahead of any vote, and those should be available for you to review, unless their website notes they're deemed security sensitive. And of course, we should note Comcast, the parent company of us, and NBC Universal is one of the donors to this project.
All right, Ted, so we heard you say that they're already working on the foundation. How much of this plan is now set, and what happens next year?
Yeah, I don't think we have a firm sense of the plan. What they have said is that the ballroom would be no higher than the current roof of the White House. And today, D.C. Council President Phil Mendelson, who sits on the Planning Commission, pressed the architect about whether the ballroom addition can be modified to maybe make it a little lower than the White House so it doesn't dwarf the classical White House view that we see. Maybe make it a little lower than the same height as the main White House building. The architect said everything is possible with time and money, but gave no promises the client, in this case the White House and its occupant, would necessarily support that. So we will be watching the next meeting set for February 5th.
More to come. All right, Ted Oberg, thank you.